All right, for those of you that don't know me, tell you a little bit about myself. I was a teacher in Cincinnati Public Schools for 30 years, taught math and computer science for 25 years, and engineering for the last 5 years. Taught at Western Hills High School for 23 years of my career. Then after I retired in 2011, I was actually selected right before I retired for the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship Program. Sounds very impressive, doesn't it? I don't feel that impressive most days, but it is a very impressive program. If anybody wants to know about it, and you are the type of people that should be applying for it, it is a phenomenal opportunity. What it allows you to do is to live in Washington, D.C. for a year or two, depending on if they ask you to stay the second year, and work at one of the major agencies, NASA, NOAA, Department of Energy, and the National Science Foundation are four of the main ones that have fellows. And what you do is you work with a sponsor on various projects. I was able to work at the National Science Foundation, and I worked on the Research Experiences for Teachers project, which we have RET teachers in the program this year, which is great. Got to travel all across the country and visit universities, and got to go to lots of conferences. One of the conferences I went to was Successful K-12 STEM Education at Drexel. It was a paper that was presented by the NSF. And at that conference, it was like within the first month that I was there, that laid the foundation for the 2 years that I was there. It was incredible. And the main things that I wound up focusing on were after-school learning, or after-school programs. A program called Engineering is Elementary, which is for K to 6 program. It's developed by the Museum of Science in Boston. And then service learning was the third one. Unfortunately, I never got to go to a service learning conference while I was a fellow. But thankfully, UC agreed to pay my conference fee, and I was able to go in April of this year to the conference in Washington, D.C. Now, kind of pique your curiosity here. What do these things have in common? We have a tomato plant, a bucket, bottle, actually oil is the idea behind this, tubes left over from TP, and a cupcake. Any ideas of what those have in common? I'm sure you probably could come up with a few different things, but keep that in mind as we go through the presentation, and at the end I'm going to ask you that again. See if you get out of the presentation what I'm aiming for. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, let's look at where we are so far. Obviously, you all came in being STEM teachers. What is STEM? Come on, participate.
Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Very good. All right, and then from that, you started looking at things being engineering focused. What does that mean? If you're going to do a lesson and you're going to focus using engineering as a focus, what does that mean? Using the engineering design process. Very good. And I should have brought my remote. Okay, so then you got into doing CBL as part of this grant from the National Science Foundation. CBL, who can tell me what CBL is? Okay, and that to me is probably one of the most difficult things about CBL. Have you all figured that one out? Especially those of you that are new. If you haven't figured that out, if you're second year, you know that, but if first year people, what's interesting though is that you also made the point that it basically pulls in the other two things. So even though I have nice little circles up here, these would be very strange looking shapes, kind of taking in more area than it shows up here. Then there's service learning. Service learning, and what intrigued me about it, having taught engineering for 5 years, was service learning gives that real world aspect to what you're engineering, what you're designing, and something meaningful. And in CBL, that actually is brought up a lot too, that you want to pick the big ideas. Things like from the grand challenges, from the National Engineering, I'm losing it. Yeah. Of engineering, thank you. I've lost it entirely right there. If you have not looked at the grand challenges, make sure you're looking at those because those are very important, finding some good ideas. Things like water, okay? Pure water for people across the world is a very, very real, urgent challenge that engineers are facing right now. There's a lot of things like that. Energy and things like that are very important. And they will give you good ideas for lessons if you haven't come up with all your lessons yet. So service learning, and there again, like I said, these would be kind of strangely shaped things because service learning will take in the other three quite a bit. Now realize that just like CBL, not everything is engineering focused in CBL, right? Because you have like that Apple video that you saw, which had more about doing voting and things like that. Not everything in service learning is engineering and STEM focused either, so you have to kind of look through the lessons and pick and choose what is adaptable to that. And if you find the right lesson, there's that little sweet spot there that incorporates all of those and will give you a fantastic lesson to do with your students. So what is service learning anyway? Well, obviously you have a service opportunity, so something that needs to be done in your community. It has to interact with learning, otherwise it's not going to be service learning. Incorporating reflections, and that's something that's important to CBL too, but it's actually very much in the forefront of service learning that you do reflections constantly. And then also involving students in the planning process. So there again, very much similar to CBL. So the planning process. And I only bring this up because if you begin looking in service learning, you're going to see IPAR-D, okay? IPAR-D is kind of like, well, you'll figure out in just a second. These are the steps that they go through. All right, identifying a community need, then determining the service and action plan, direct, indirect, or advocacy. The action can be different. Direct means you go out and maybe you are helping somebody, build a garden so that they can grow food for the community. Indirect would be something where maybe you're raising funds for a project, or maybe you're picking up litter in the neighborhood. That doesn't directly impact the people in the neighborhood, but obviously it does indirectly because it makes their neighborhood look better and that type of thing. Or advocacy. Maybe you can go out to the Kiwanis and speak about why water purity is important in the world, or why there's a problem with graffiti in the neighborhood, and ideas that you have that might address that. So advocacy can just be something that you're supporting that idea with. Reflection has to be continuous, connected, and contextual. Very important. That reflection piece is very important. And then demonstrating learning goals that are met, etc. Oh, excuse me. All right, now, does that look kind of like anything else that you've ever seen?
EDP.
Very good, the engineering design process. A little bit different terminology in that, but it's amazing how much that they do relate to one another. And that was one of the things that kept hitting me throughout the conference, was how much it sounded like EDP, and also as far as the challenge-based learning aspect, the students being involved in the activity. Because you can say to your kids, hey, we're going to go work on cleaning up graffiti in the neighborhood, and the kids might not think that that's an issue. They might think that litter is more of an issue, or whatever. So you have to make sure that the kids are connected to it, and that's like CBL brings into fact. All right, so we have to be more focused. STEM, okay. The learning needs to be primarily in one or more of the STEM subjects. As I said, STEM has a lot of different things related to it, but that's where you have to start is within STEM. All right, to be engineering focused for our lessons, we make sure that we follow EDP and we reflect ACS. For CBL, it has to involve challenge-based learning, and service learning addresses the needs of the community. So to have that sweet spot, you have to make sure that all four of those things are going to happen with the lesson that you pick to do. So let's look at an example. Excuse me a second. That's my school garden that I had the last 2 years that I was teaching, and two of my little children that Mr. Edwards will remember really well. And what they're doing is they're actually testing soil for pH. That's what they're doing there. Now, STEM. What would be STEM type thing that you could do with a school garden? Any STEM, any of those.
Doing the science by testing the soil.
Okay, doing science by testing the soil for pH. What could you do with the T, technology? T tends to be a little tougher.
You could use like a moisture tester too, like use tools. to
Okay,
test
use tools. Yes.
They can also design like water collectors to collect rainwater to be used later on, so that they're not just relying on rain at a certain time and they're not relying on water from the building that's
Right.
collected.
See that big white thing in the back there? Yeah, that's a rain barrel. And by the way, if you decide ever to do a school garden, the Civic Garden Center, if you hook up with them in Cincinnati and you go through their workshop, Coca-Cola will give you one of those for your school garden. And that thing collects a ton of rain. I mean, it's amazing how much it collects. Another thing, one of the things that I think of when I think of technology is the planting beds that we used are that engineered lumber. Okay, they're not actually wooden. We got those from CEEMS, the kits that they have available. All right, what about the E?
Find out the space.
Okay, planning out the space, and that's very important. And I had the kids come up with different designs, and then they voted on what design that they wanted to use and why they wanted to use it that way. And it was funny because when we went out to put it then in place, the beds, we found out we couldn't put one of the beds where we had planned on putting it because there was a drain access type thing there. And so we had to move it like about 3 inches, so we got into the discussion of tolerance. And, is 3 inches more or less going to change the makeup of the garden? Well, no. But in something like the space shuttle, 3 inches makes a lot of difference. So, you have to worry about tolerances depending on the thing. And then mathematics. Anybody?
We're like going to use the garden materials or the food you develop for selling. So it's a fundraiser.
Okay, so fundraiser you could do it with? Growth rate, yes, very much so. And one of my favorite ones was we had to order dirt for those, so volume. And it was so funny because when we got the dirt and we put it in the beds, the raised beds, they came just to the top. And everybody was like, wow, that's lucky. And I said, no, it's not. They planned it. They figured out what it was. All right, now, engineering focused. You can have a garden, right? What makes it engineering? Engineering design process. What kind of things do you need to do?
Research what you plan on putting in and what are the constraints or requirements to grow that material.
Very good.
Everything requires different pHs, different amounts of water when you water it.
Right, very good.
Amount of space.
Different amount of space?
Plants need, like pumpkins need lots of space.
Right, very good. Sunlight, those kinds of things. What are you going to grow? How are you going to decide what you're going to grow? Where do you start at? Okay. Actually, even before all of that. Okay, but usually what do you do first? What's step number 2? At least in most EDPs. Brainstorming, okay? You sit down and you say, okay, what do we want to grow? And people will come up with ideas. Okay, zucchini, okra? No, yeah. And then you go through the list. Tomatoes, green beans, green peppers, things that you think people will want. And then you have to decide those things, doing the research, maybe going out and surveying people and asking them. So all the steps that go with the engineering process there. All right, CBL. Oh, and by the way, on the engineering focus, let me mention one thing. We had what was called a Three Sisters garden. I wrote 3 grants for this garden and got all 3 grants. And one of them had to do with Native American engineering. Three Sisters garden, if you don't know about it, it's how Native Americans used to plant corn, green beans, and squash. And they worked together in harmony. The pole beans provide nitrogen and they crawl up the corn. The squash provides natural mulch to the ground. So it's interesting how, even though they didn't have any degrees in engineering, they still came up with that. So CBL.
big idea would be hunger.
Okay, could be. That is one. Obviously, there's more than one, but that's definitely one possibility. What's the thing that we keep hearing from the First Lady? Healthier, eating healthier. Okay, and that's probably one of my biggest things was getting the kids connected to food, because when they saw the potatoes came out of the ground, that was a rude awakening for them. It's like, that's where French fries come from? Yes, it does. We dig them up from the ground. So, all right, and then service learning.
Food could be donated to a homeless shelter or a food.
Okay, all right, good. Food bank type thing.
It actually can go to some of your lower income students to take them.
Right. Okay.
If they're working to produce it.
Okay. All right, and you could even do things like have it go to the cafeteria so that they get fresher fruits and vegetables, nicer salads. And one of the things that I found out with, like I said, the fact that getting the nutrition aspect in there was the kids found out that they liked things that they told me they didn't like, because once you taste them fresh, it's entirely different. And so hopefully you're getting those habits with CBL. You're getting those habits in the kids of liking to have those things. All right, now, the best way to me to plan a service learning lesson is actually to work backward. Okay? You say, what service learning project do I want to do? Now, can I apply CBL to that? Can I apply engineering to that? Can I apply STEM lessons to that? To work backwards. So if you work backwards and you say, I want to make a garden to raise food for the local food bank, then work backward from there. I think it's easier to go that direction than it is to go the other way. To say, I want to do something dealing with nutrition or plant growth. That's a little bit tougher than to kind of find the thing to, and plus there's a lot of programs out there. That's the other thing that I want to show you. All right, so how can we create a service learning lesson? Okay, looking at service learning resources, go on the wiki. Excuse me. And I'm going to go out of my PowerPoint here real fast. And under workshops, you will see service learning resources with my name on it.
Use the Word document. Yeah, it looks like how
Thank you.
you grab.
Use the Word document.
Yeah, 'cause the other one I eliminated.
And you just need to, you can view it, or if you want to download it, you can. And I actually have a hard copy of it. I did this partially because I am always concerned that, sure, the technology may fail me. Taught computer for 25 years, I know how it goes. But also I figure you can put them in your binder then if you want to, and that'll be a good reference for you. I just didn't want you to have to type in the links, obviously. All right, let me go back to my PowerPoint here. Oops. All right, now, come here. All right, now, you can either work by yourself, or if you want to work in teams, you can do that to find a topic that looks like would be interesting for you and your students. And I'm going to run down the list real fast to make some comments on some things. Just a second. Okay. All right, so let me go down the list, and before you, because you may decide, and say, I want to do this. Anybody want to do it with me? Oops, wrong one. Back to here. Okay, all right. So the original part, that first section there, the searchable databases, that's exactly what they are. Is that you can go in and click on those, and it's not wanting to. Let's do it this way. Sure. Okay. There we go. All right. Those projects there are. You can put in, it depends on how they have it set up. Some of them have it set up by subject area, grade level, various things. You can look at those. For general, personally, I don't think I would hit that today unless there's something specific that you have in mind that you want to look for. Let me warn you on the GSN, the Generator School Network, which I find a weird acronym, but that's what they call it. That was like something they were really pushing at the conference that they wanted us to sign up for and use. And some of these you do have to register to be able to use them, but it's not any big deal. That one has a real problem to it, I found out. When I started clicking on things, was that the lessons, a lot of times somebody will say, there'll be just a paragraph that says, my students are going to start a community garden, and we're going to do this, this, and this, and it's just a little paragraph. I'll update later, and then there's nothing there. So some people actually downloaded the stuff that had their lesson plans and everything, but some things didn't. So GSN, just be aware that that's an issue with that. All right, let me go down, and I want to just talk briefly about some of these, the individual sites. EPICS, Engineering Projects and Community Service, which is from Purdue, under individual topics or sites. Purdue has this wonderful program. It was originally an NSF-funded program where their freshmen go through this EPICS program, where they incorporate community service in their freshman year. Then they expanded it to high school. So there are EPIC high schools out there, and they have lists of the various projects that their students work on in those high schools. H2O for Life gets into water. And this, I'll tell you, as far as if you're interested in doing a water unit, this group is fantastic. It was started by 2 teachers, so they know what they were doing. And they do a lot of things for raising money for like hand sanitizing stations or pure water. And they have specific areas, like they'll have a school in Kenya, and you can raise money for that. So depending on what approach you want to take, you can do various things. And then they also have a lot of activities to do. One of the activities that they have to do is to have kids actually carry water to learn what it's like for people in those countries, that they have to go down to like some sort of pond or stream or something and get water to take back home. And they may have to walk 2 miles or something with that bucket of water. So it's something that they have. By the way, I have things up here for you. One of the awareness things I thought was interesting was this is a timer for you to take your shower. So it's a 2-minute or 3-minute or whatever it is timer, and that you flip it over when you take your shower. That's as long as you should be taking your shower. That's long enough to get clean, but not to waste water. So to get people more aware of how long they're spending in the shower.
I couldn't wash my hair in 3 minutes. It takes too much.
I'm just telling you what they told us. Okay, Mentor Up. Mentor Up is an interesting program in that its focus isn't on the project, it's on the approach. The approach is to reach out to people who are older than you are for the kids. So maybe it's going to a community center and working with people on learning how to use computer programs and things like that. So there's a lot of different things like that. And that one, like I said, it's kind of a different approach. So if you have a great idea and you can't figure out how to do it, Mentor Up may be your way of doing the idea with somebody else. Biodiesel, turning grease into fuel. That was actually started by a girl, I think she was like 14 or 15 years old. 12? Okay. Okay. Just phenomenal to listen to her speak. She was actually the opening speaker at the conference. And just phenomenal kid to listen to her speak and what she did in her the area that she lives in. I think it was Rhode Island, is that? Yeah. And the whole area, she organized things of getting restaurants and that to recycle grease into fuel. Texting and driving. Now that one's one that tends to be more of a social studies thing, but I think math, you could probably get into that a lot, with delays in with people texting and being distracted driving and that type of thing. But that's worked on by the, it doesn't say, it's State Farm. It doesn't say it up there. I thought it did as part of the web address. Global issues, other things as far as water challenges, there's a group called Students Rebuild. Preserving and improving forests, I thought of you.
I just saw that one.
Because they have a really cool thing that you can make a map of your property and then decide things that you want to work on. And I'm not sure how directly you can connect that to some of the things you were doing with your class. But I don't know if you know what Kevin did. He did a neighborhood, and they laid out different things within the neighborhood. But that looks at like if someone has let's say, an 80-acre farm, and they've got problems with runoff and those types of things, that they can help them deal with that. So that would be good for a more rural area too. Okay. Environmental service learning projects is basically what it says. Aquaponics and hydroponics, and there's another one I wanted to put up here next to that. If you're interested in aquaponics and hydroponics, look up a guy named Will Allen, and his program's called Growing Power. He basically worked in Milwaukee in an area that they considered a food desert, and put up greenhouses and that type of thing and raised food, hired people in the inner city, and provided fresh fruits and vegetables for people in the inner city. Phenomenal program. He was actually a basketball star, I think, before a football star, before that. High School Enterprise, I actually had the fortune of being able to go to that at GM's headquarters 2 years ago. And they had students come in, and what's really cool about that project, unfortunately it's not being funded by the NSF right now, but they still have the projects online, is that students would do 4 years. So they actually got to do the iteration aspect of they'd work on a project and then go back and improve it and come back the next year with it. So that was a really interesting program. And then I think most of the other ones look pretty, 41 Pounds is basically deals with junk mail and getting off the list of getting junk mail, but you could use that as part of a bigger lesson. But I think it's interesting how people do that type of thing, that service type thing. And then the last one, Lead to Feed, I thought that was kind of interesting. The school's mascot was actually cobblers, the shoe cobbler type thing. But they started something called the Cobbler Cafe where they made cobbler, the food cobbler, and to try to provide healthy snacks for kids after school. And the money that they raised from that, they then turned around to help buy lunches and things like that for the kids that were less fortunate in the school. So they kind of cycled it around that way. I also went to another conference where I saw something called homebaking.org, and I bought her curriculum. It's on how you can do science with cooking. So if anybody is interested in that, I can kind of share that kind of thing with you, because it's a really great curriculum that she has. This is obviously my first iteration of this presentation. So, your feedback and telling me like certain things didn't work or you didn't understand how that fit together, that's good, because I'll go in and I'll fill in some information based on some of those things. So thank you for your input on some of the things that are on there. Now, is there anybody who found something they thought is definitely an avenue that they could go down? I know you did.
I'm doing a lesson on slope, and I'm going to use wheelchair ramps as my big idea. There's actually the Federal Housing Loan Bank of Cincinnati has a fund that if a disabled person can qualify up to $2,000 for materials for a wheelchair ramp at their house, and it's built on volunteers come out and build the ramp for them.
Because he was going to have students actually,
Design it for their own
design
house.
one for their own house, a mock-up kind of thing. But this would be even cooler if they could like build it
Design
for
it
somebody.
and maybe even have contacts with them that when they
Right.
actually go to build it, they could volunteer to go out and actually hammer it
Mhm.
and nails and
That would be neat.
set the ramps.
Very good. Okay, anybody else find anything that they thought was, and I know, he was further in the wheelchair ramp, so you were already kind of into
Yeah.
a service learning realm. So that kind of makes it a little bit easier. But anybody else find anything that they thought was interesting? Yes.
I really like the students build.org because we actually have this family art night thing every year where we invite pretty much members of the community to come in and make art with different themes. And we've made capes or
They gave me handouts at the conference, so I'm going to give them away.
we've
So.
made capes and masks for kids who were in like cancer wards and stuff, just to say like you're a superhero.
Right.
And so, I guess we've kind of done this service learning thing with the community,
Right.
But I just love the idea that, like, kids, our school, and all middle schools our kids have the least amount of money. And it's just a way for them to do, like, a symbolic gesture.
Right.
To someone else without raising money.
Mhm.
And money is being raised by what they do.
Right.
And the water one with the beads, they are giving that to the families, which I guess beads are big in ceremonies
Right.
and things in that country.
And like I said, they're also taking, from what I understand, they're taking some of them and having some famous artists design some things with the beads. Because I asked them what they were going to do with them. And that was one of the things they said they were going to do with that, and then auction those things off that they were making. Yeah, and by the way, let me kind of tag something on just because I had this thought. The whole money issue I know is an issue. And obviously, however your school deals with that. Some you have to set up maybe like a club aside from your classroom that you can do your finances, run that through it. But just be safe, okay? I don't want anybody to get in trouble for raising money and having issues with that, because I know my school was really hyper about even teachers like selling pencils or notebooks and things like that, keeping a kitty in their desk to just, I go out and buy notebooks with the money, I don't make anything, kind of thing. I did that for years, and then they said you can't do that anymore, and it's like, it's kind of a shame because kids need that, to have that ability to do that. But yeah, fundraising is sometimes gets a little crazy. But yeah, that's one of the advantages to that program, is that you don't have to worry about handling any money because you're sending the beads to the organization that's going to do something with them. So very cool. All right, anybody else find anything interesting? Oh, come on, I know some of you did. I know somebody in the back that did. The math.
Oh, yeah, there was a young lady.
He actually I think he was dealing with the city orchestra in that particular one. That project was involving using mathematics for basically extra outside of school organizations, that the advanced math students would provide services for those organizations that needed someone to crunch numbers for them, and maybe do talks to the city council or whatever, and that type of thing. So that was kind of an interesting take if you're a math teacher. Very different way of approaching something that is purely math. Okay, I know some of the rest of you didn't. Like I said, I'll give you some time to finish that up, but let me just, a couple things I wanted to touch on. So why service learning? Okay, I always hear the comment with people, oh yeah, service learning, that's really important because you get kids that'll, they'll care about the engineering project, and usually underrepresented groups, usually minorities and girls, and middle school kind of kids, you tend to draw them in. And that is true, you do. But I think there's a bigger reason for service learning. I'm an emotional person, so I can't really comment on what was there.
Passed away, right?
Pardon?
Did he pass away?
I don't know. Did he? But I think that service learning is the key to that. I really do. I think that that's how we can light that fire in kids. So, on the lighter side, what do these things have in common? Any ideas? Yeah, they can all be used for service learning. This is a tomato plant. In fact, this is an heirloom tomato plant, purple calabash. Seeds were from Monticello, so this could be the great-great-grand seedling of Thomas Jefferson's plants. And if I have 4 of them. If anyone would like one, you're welcome, or 2 or 3 or 4. You're welcome to them because they came up volunteer this year in my garden, so I've got extras. Bucket. Carry water, okay, to do the water thing that H2O for Life does, because that's what kids in those countries do. And there's actually a neat invention. There have been people that have come up with things. One is, it looks like a wheel that holds water. It's hard plastic that the kids can then roll along, so they're not lugging this and doing all sorts of damage to their shoulders and such, that someone came up with, which I thought was pretty cool. That's an engineering aspect on it. What about oil? Biodiesel, yes. Recycling biodiesel to use for fuel. Toilet paper tubes. Okay, composting. And I actually, we were discussing the fact that I had one time thought about this and never actually did it, but I wanted to do a collection, and some people refer to these as dirters. You know why? But to do a dirter collection, because this is a unit that you can count. And you can do all sorts of fun mathematical things of, like when do they go up in number, collection type thing. You can graph them and all sorts of things. But then you can basically talk to the kids about how much are you saving out of the waste stream, the landfills. I mean, you could have like mountains of these things wherever you're going to collect them. And then talk about composting versus recycling. Okay, obviously you want them out of the landfill. What's the next best thing to do? Is it composting it or recycling it, so you could get into that type of thing. And so you could even do like a community type thing. Cupcakes. Well, come on, guys. Not everything's service learning. Let's face it. It's my way of saying thank you. I have cupcakes for you. So, just let you know. All right, so we have the rest of the time in here. If you guys want to continue to look at stuff, you're welcome to. Anybody that wants any of my little tchotchke things, they give you stuff at the conference. Oh, one of the things I didn't bring up was Earth Echo. If anybody's into like oceanic type things, Philippe Cousteau, those of you that are old enough that the name Cousteau rings a bell with you, Jacques Cousteau's grandson, he's involved in it. He was one of the speakers at the conference too, and I expected to hear this beautiful French accent when he got up, and he sounded so Midwestern, it was crazy. But he looked French. But that's an organization that he's involved in, and it's basically working to restore the coral reefs and that type of thing. So, and I've got different things from like Text and Drive, and this is the Semester of Service, which is the organization does. This is one of those things that would be a good reference maybe to pull some things out of, because it's designed to actually do a whole course with. But you might be able to get some things out of there. I've got a couple of those. So anybody wants to come up and get some little tchotchkes, that's fine. And I'll put out cupcakes. I actually made enough cupcakes for, I hope, everybody. So if you want to email everybody and tell them that there's cupcakes down here.